Hello and welcome back to the second episode of the third Floor Esch podcast. I am Dylan Euler.
I'm Evan Porterfield.
And today we have an awesome guest on. We wanted to, shoot a little preface, shoot a little intro before he made his way here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm excited for this episode. I thought the first episode went really well.
Yeah, it went great, and I think we both learned a lot about each other.
Yeah.
And
I hope you learned about each other as well.
Yes.
Learned about us.
And last time we were both staring at each other from across the side.
Yes.
But now we're right next to each other.
But now we're next to each other. We're gonna be staring at our guest,
Who is
Rick
Dunkle.
Rick Dunkle.
Rick
We're gonna learn all about Rick on this second episode of the Third Floor Esch podcast. It should be awesome. I think personally, I know Rick, but I don't know Rick a whole lot. He's kind of an enigma.
He's
almost
one of those people that about him, but
yeah,
he's done so much that we don't know about him.
And I don't know about what he's done.
Yes.
You're saying. I can read his LinkedIn, I can read his bio and whatever, but it doesn't tell us about really, what he's been up to the last however many years of his life.
Done so much. He has so much knowledge, and so
yeah,
we're gonna try to dive into that in today's episode. Learn a little bit about Rick, who he is, past, present, and future.
Of course. Let's do it. With us, we have Rick Dunkle. Thank you so much for coming on.
The man.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm excited to talk to you today about where you've come from, what you're excited about going forward, all these fun things that you have going on here at UIndy and in your life back home. So let's get into it.
I think a lot of us know you, Rick, as our professor, but maybe not a lot of us know the background of who Rick is, where he comes about. So can you just tell us a little bit about home life, where you grew up?
Sure.
What did you do for fun?
My home life, sure. Grew
Little
up
Rick.
I consider Franklin my hometown.
Okay.
That's just 20 minutes south of Indianapolis. But I split growing up between there and West Lafayette because my dad taught at Purdue.
Okay.
So I grew up pretty much on the Purdue campus. We were a little off there, but it was back in the age when you could ride your bike and go do things without the helicopter parents following you.
I had a little bit of that too growing up. I loved riding my bike around my town and whatnot. So
it's strange to me to see how things happen now because that was
it feels like right after our generation is when that kind of stopped happening because I didn't really grow up with the devices and all the kids these days at the dinner table with their iPad. I wasn't an iPad kid.
I was outside
that.
And now I know they've got apps that will tell you how fast your kid is driving.
Yes.
When they're going
Yep.
My brother gets reports on how his kids are driving. And I'm like,
Yes.
what?
Yes.
I didn't even want my parents knowing where I was at night.
Oh yeah. Nope. Not at all.
No.
So Franklin and West Lafayette.
Franklin, West Lafayette, and a small little detour to a little town called Greenfield, Wisconsin for a year.
Oh. Where in Wisconsin is Greenfield?
It's a suburb of Milwaukee.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was fun.
Yeah.
That's where I discovered French silk pie at Baker Square.
Okay.
And I'm always trying to get Liam to bring me back when he comes from home.
Yums.
We can.
What's your favorite pie?
We can arrange
French
that.
silk pie.
We can
French
arrange
silk
that.
pie. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm going spring break. I'm going home. We can.
But only at Baker Square. If you ever get them to underwrite you, you should think about it.
There we go. And what did little Rick enjoy doing? Hobbies, interests.
I liked living in the woods. I played in the woods. That was kind of my
with the squirrels and the rabbits.
We lived on this place on not a lot of land. That's the wrong way to say it because we didn't have a lot of land. But we had a field and we had a creek and we had a cliff. And I would go play on the cliff. And go explore the woods.
Thrill junkie.
And just make up stories about what the random houses were that I would find. Because one day I found this street that I'd never seen before, and I was convinced. And then I found a house in the middle of the woods. I was like, oh, this is.
Something.
There's a murderer here.
Had to be.
I was 7.
So you were a creative.
Oh yeah,
Younger.
without a doubt.
Yeah, you were an imaginative kid. You enjoyed.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
People always ask what would you? Yes. Very early on, it was when people get their GI Joes and their Transformers.
Yeah.
Mine were being filmed and scripted.
Okay.
When I was a kid. Yeah.
So you did do, you dabbled in the video and
Oh,
producing
absolutely.
and
Did
stuff.
you have
Just
little like camcorders and like house
it was a
recording?
different age, so I
Yeah.
cannot say that I had a little camcorder. I had a VCR that straps around your
Oh, there we
shoulder,
go.
connected to a camera,
Oh,
and that was what we recorded on. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Now-
You and your spoiled phone videos.
How did that come about though? Because you're young, so did your parents kind of influence that on you, or was that just something that you kind of took up on yourself?
That was my dad. Yeah,
Okay.
he was big. He always liked tech. Like we had an Apple IIc. He was always big into Apple, and I wouldn't say he liked. He was one of those people that filmed every holiday. Like it wasn't like he was into
Yeah.
like creatively filming, but you knew if it was a holiday or if it was a sporting event or something, camera was coming out. Cameras was coming out. I've actually been cleaning out his garage for the past month, and I just stumbled across all these VHS
that's
tapes
awesome.
We need to
where
bring it
they're
in.
labeled
Bring 'em in.
graduation, Rick's play, all of
Rick's
this.
play.
Well, and like, what am I gonna do? Love you, Dad, but I'm not gonna like go back and like digitize my play from when I was
Do
in
it.
middle. No, I who has that kind
Memories.
of time? No, they went into the dumpster. Sorry.
no.
No.
I kept one. I kept one Christmas one because I figured it hit all the family.
There you go.
Yeah.
That way everyone can have one clip from the past. But no, I was not about to like create a historical reference on the Dunkles.
But you have the camera still.
No.
Oh, you tossed
you know
the
what?
camera?
I can't say that I don't have the camera because I haven't done the attic yet. And I mean, I found all my old Transformers. I found my brother's
That's
every
cool.
award he ever got from when he was in elementary school. So
Okay.
it's entirely possible
It's
that
still up
camera
there
will turn
somewhere.
up. Yeah.
I hope it's still up there. Bring it in one day.
That'd
And then
be
you
crazy.
gotta put it
That'd
in
be
a
awesome.
put it in a glass box, and we can have it as like a little Rick
trophy.
museum.
Yeah.
Put it in your
That'd be
office
great.
somewhere. Exactly.
Every
So,
time you guys record something on your phone, I'll just pull it out. This is what it used to be in my day.
back in my day, we had these. We had
I
a
hate
box
that I
on my
can say
shoulder.
back in my day now. That's terrible.
So, in college,
Mm.
which is where you ended up going, obviously probably because it's home, right? So, what made you go down the path of like journalism and kind of like communication? Was that just your love of cameras, or was there something else that kind of inspired you to choose that major?
Combination, writing, anything that involved writing, I wanted to be a part of. And the way that our school did it, you had to be invited to join the yearbook.
Okay. Your high school?
So
Okay.
they would come and recruit 8th graders at the middle school
Mm-hmm.
based on recommendations from the teachers. I was not recommended.
How dare
So the
Little
newspaper,
do they know.
the newspaper did, because my middle school English professor would get on me because when I was in middle school, which you can't do this anymore, I would write stories about my friends being killed. For creative stories, I was a big Freddy Krueger fan. Like Nightmare on Elm Street was big back then.
Yeah.
So Freddy would be hunting me and my friends, and so I had to have a meeting with my teacher where I wasn't allowed to kill my classmates. But the thing was, my classmates would come up and be like, hey, kill me next. Like, they'd come up and ask for me to write them into it. And then later in life, I still did that. Like, so I would use my friends' names in all the stuff that I did.
Gotcha.
And so I actually reached out and I was like, hey, just so you know, when you were stifling that creativity, I actually get paid to do that now.
Yeah, hold on.
So anyway, I held it against them that they didn't recruit me for yearbook. So the whole first year of high school, I kept going by the yearbook office like monthly that whole first semester. And I'd be like, so your practices suck. You need to not your recruiting practices are terrible. And by second semester, she had me in. And then I ended up becoming...
As she should have.
As she should have. I made it very clear. And then I ended up becoming editor. And she actually became one of my best friends. We were friends for the rest of her life. Yeah, it was awesome.
That's fantastic.
But that was it. Anything writing I got involved in. So that meant, especially in the high school level, journalism, theater, and yearbook.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so you say theater, you said you were in plays. Was theater a big part of your upbringing through high school? Were you in much?
It was, it was part of my, it was weird. Yeah, the wording on that upbringing. Yes, I was involved in every play that there was.
Okay.
I do not sing. So when it was musical time, I would be in the light booth.
Gotcha.
Or I would be like the assistant director or something like that.
Stage
There you
crew,
go.
But if-
technician type.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We always knew. They made me audition once. And they're like, oh, we've heard your brother sing. We know you'll be able to do it. They never asked me to sing again. It was like Wizard of Oz, and I biffed it. But yeah, no. Plays always.
Yeah.
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 Cool. So you're excited that I imagine from that background, you're excited that theater is now a part of the comm department.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just gives me all sorts of imagination for how we're all going to work together in the future. Yeah.
And we'll talk about that more going forward. But kind of bringing us back to young Rick.
Yeah.
In at Franklin College writing, what were you writing back then mainly?
Sure.
Like what was it that you wanted to write?
Buffy.
Yeah.
I was a huge Doctor Who,
Okay.
Star Trek, Star Wars, and Buffy fan.
Okay.
So at Franklin College, they didn't have a film or TV major, so I had to combine journalism and theater to kind of make my own major.
Kind of like pave your own path, so to speak.
Exactly. And so most of my writing there, I got one of my professors to do a playwriting independent study class. That he offered the class because we requested it, so I did playwriting in there. I took the creative writing English class. Anything that allowed me to write, and then I got involved in the yearbook. I did get involved in the yearbook. Yearbook. I was on the newspaper, did the radio station, did the TV station.
Okay.
My freshman year, I was actually teaching at the high school because our journalism advisor had retired, and so I convinced the principal that if I went to Franklin's College and stayed in town, that he would have to hire me to continue to teach. And
adjunct.
they fell for it. Yeah.
I got him.
Well,
okay.
I know you carried on after Franklin. You ended up carrying on your education, getting a bachelor's of arts and then also a master's. Kind of walk us through that process, the decision of carrying on your education. What made you want to do more?
Sure. Franklin, and no offense because I love Franklin, loved Franklin College.
Yeah.
It was not my first choice for school. My first choice was actually Emerson College in Boston.
Okay.
Because when I had visited it, do you guys know who Henry Winkler is, if I say that name?
Yes, I
The
do.
principal in
I wrote
Scream.
him.
Okay.
I wrote him a
Sounds
letter
familiar.
back in like elementary school for one of his books.
That's awesome.
And he wrote me back, and I still have it back home.
He
It's
would
in my little
definitely write you
dresser.
back. That's the kind of person
That's
he
cool.
is. He
Yes.
is an Emerson alum, and when my dad and I went to visit that school, he was in the bookstore, and like I only knew him. It was pre-Scream, so I knew him as the Fonz. And basically, he came
Was
up
this
to
your
me
first like
and told me.
starstruck moment?
He told me I needed to go to Emerson. I was like, well, if the Fonz tells you that you got to go to Emerson, you got to go to Emerson.
Yeah.
And even when we did the tour, which is why I make us do it now too, we did the tour, and the way Emerson, at least back then, was like it was all a bunch of subterranean like tunnels, and then one would just come out, and you're in a TV studio. And that day they had a daily news or something like that, and so they had me read the news. Because they didn't have their person. And I don't know if that was a scheme that they do when they're given tours or what.
Whoops,
but I
that
hopped
person
in and
isn't
read
here.
it, and that was enough for me. Like, they let me do the news, and I met Henry Winkler. Like, I was only going to Emerson. But they did not give us enough financial aid, so that was not an option.
Okay.
So that's where I finagled the Franklin College, and my brother had gone there, so we had relationships there. But then spring break of my junior year of college,
Yeah.
I went to LA.
Okay.
Buddy of mine from high school, actually couple buddies of mine from high school were out there, and I went to visit them, and they had all been in my year. We had grown up, so when I talk about not the nerd thing, the sci-fi love, like we in high school filmed ourselves in Star Trek uniforms. Like we would write scripts, and we would go and we would do like, we would make little short films and stuff like that. So they all went to LA pretty much as soon as we graduated, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So then when I went and spent spring break with them, I visited, one of my buddies was in film school out there, and I looked at his school, Columbia College, and that was it. When I came back from spring break, I announced to everyone I was dropping out of Franklin College. And they all said, Rick, you're going to be a senior next year. Just wait one more year.
Yeah.
I was like, nope, got to go now. It's time.
Yeah.
And I did. And I dropped out. By August, I was on the road for LA.
Wow.
Wow.
But I promised I made two promises. One, that I would get my degree.
Yeah.
Yep. Always.
And two,
Need
that
it.
eventually I would come back and teach what I learned.
There you
Awesome.
go. So, you wanted to go out there because you absolutely fell in love with the school and with the program, and it kind of allowed you to do more of what you wanted to do without having to pave your own path, so to speak.
Yeah, and the people. I mean, I grew up. I'm sure it's a little more diverse now, but when I tell you I grew up in the whitest of white towns, like when I got off the plane, I mean, I called my parents because I was like everyone's so different here. Everyone's so different here, and like some people get afraid of that, but I was like, I can't wait to meet everyone. So yeah, there was no turning back. The moment, all I had to do was get there, and
that's awesome.
That's cool. And then he mentioned the masters. After Columbia College in Hollywood, which, by the way, my friend goes to Columbia College in Chicago.
They used to be affiliated.
Okay.
They branched off. Yeah, we got that question a lot, especially when we were there as students. They may be re-affiliated.
Because when I saw it on your LinkedIn and I saw just the logo, I'm like, this looks exactly like his logo.
Back when I went there, they were still affiliated because I know one of my best friends had transferred from the Chicago campus, but they're not affiliated anymore.
Okay.
But how I got to grad school was not the intent. But the last semester we were on a quarter system, so it was actually the second to last quarter of my second senior year. Because when you transfer, you end up having to take some extra stuff.
Yeah. So fifth year senior. So you had 2 years.
Fifth year senior, super senior.
Columbia.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was a TV drama writing class that was being offered. That was being taught by a showrunner in the industry. And since it was my senior year, I knew I had to get in that class. TV writing is what I wanted to do because of Buffy and Doctor Who. So this is pre the day where you could go online and register for classes. So I actually parked my car the night before at campus, spent the night in my car.
Which is so like insane to think about.
What, that you would have to do that in order to get into a class?
Well, yeah, and thinking about like how
I mean, that's what you guys
worked.
do for my classes, right? Come on.
I mean, I'm up at 6:45 and like rolling over to my laptop and going refresh.
It's hard out here.
No, this is packing up your car with blankets and like I'm getting in that class. I'm getting in the class.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about things like that. You know how they were back. When you couldn't just register for something online.
See, we think we have it bad.
We don't.
Yeah, we wake up at 6 a.m.
Hey,
Rick's management meetings at 7 a.m. No.
Oh, that was terrible. Oh.
Okay, so masters at Loyola.
So I ended up in that TV drama writing class. It made me realize when I went out there, I was like, maybe I want to direct, maybe I want to write screenplay. Like, I was all over and I'd done acting, so I was like, I don't care, like whatever my path is.
As that class was probably intended to like let you try a little bit of everything, and
hopefully
it's not like your last semester of college going, what do I want to do here?
Well, and when you're in Hollywood, I mean, I was a fan of Buffy. He brought in the showrunner for Buffy to come talk to us. Like, I was like, and
take my money.
There was no way. But that was only one class, and it was at the end of the year. So I knew I needed to learn more about TV writing. So I started looking at master's programs because I wasn't quite ready to go into the world yet. I needed to learn more. And Loyola Marymount, where I ended up getting my MFA.
Which is where? Sorry.
It's in LA.
Okay.
It's
okay.
It's in a nice part of it, like in a you can kind of see the water from campus kind of part. Yeah, it was cool.
Kind of like UCLA vibes, where
because I'd been up in the
nice
valley.
campus.
Yeah. So I looked at UCLA. I looked at USC and LMU. TV was not as cool. Like this was in the era of film was the daddy and and
You're sounding like
TV
Evan now.
was like the little kid. Like it wasn't as respected as it is now. So their screenwriting program, I actually had to convince them to let me do it in normally you would create a film, and I convinced them that if I came there, I wanted to do it in TV. UCLA would not let me do that. USC would not let me do that, but Loyola Marymount was willing to let me cater my program that way, and so that's why I went there. Yeah. And it was the best decision. I mean, that was a phenomenal program.
And what were you able to accomplish through those 2 years at Loyola? Obviously, you learned more about TV writing, about what you wanted to do.
Years.
3-ish years.
3-ish years.
I don't know. I feel like most masters, at least nowadays,
it was a 3-year
2
program, and it took me 4.
Okay.
Because I already had a full-time, I had a full-time job. By the end of it, I was working with my professors to finish my degree because I was already working at Paramount or Sony actually when I finished my degree.
Gotcha.
But so that's how I got my internship at Paramount. and then that led to my job at Sony.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Very
guess
cool.
kind of asking about that Paramount experience, was that like eye-opening? That kind of seemed like one of the first like
Was that the pivot?
real like experiences you got. Was that like, okay, I'm locked in?
Oh yeah, because up until then I was working at Starbucks and
Wherever.
Jamba
Yeah,
Juice
yeah.
and at the public affairs office at
Yeah.
LMU. Like, so this, because Star Trek filmed at the Paramount lot. So I had seen that lot all my life when I'd looked at like videos of films getting shot there and stuff like that. So yeah, that was like when you go under those arches and you're like on the Paramount lot, like that was defining for me. And that job sucked though. I had to get up at 6. I had to be on the lot by 6 a.m. every day. So that was not fun.
Yeah.
But I got to drive a little cart around after I did all the like
go.
ratings and numbers and stuff.
That's all you need.
I would have to go deliver physical reports because this was very early email days too. And Buffy's spinoff Angel shot on that lot, and there was a Star Trek show called Enterprise shooting on that lot. So yeah, I was in heaven. I broke onto the Angel lot, and for anyone that knows the show, they they had a private investigation center that worked out of a hotel. So I stole one of the business cards off out of it and held on to it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hey now. There's nothing wrong with, taking what you need.
No, one day it'll be worth like millions, and I'll still not sell it.
There you go.
No. Never. Evan, you had a question for me?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about your time at Paramount, kind of that being your first experience, real life. Did you feel comfortable? Like, was that a good experience, or was it just like weird? Because I know you learn about these things, but then you're like there, and it's like,
Is doing
Did
it
it
a
feel
whole lot
right?
different than being in the classroom?
yes,
Through
Yes.
college. Did you get a whole lot of experiential
Ooh. Yeah,
education?
Yes, and I'll be honest with you, like it, because I'm sure we're gonna get a point where we talk about the career that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, like I was just so excited every step of the way that I didn't even think about the work part of what we were doing. I mean, driving around those carts, like.
Not getting paid enough for
Oh.
your hourly.
Thank God for being able to max out your financial aid loans. No, yeah, they did. It was a paid internship, but they did not pay. But I mean, like you had perks. Like I got to go to the Stuntman Awards that year, and like Quentin Tarantino and I both hit on the same woman,
There you
and
go.
like he was so rude to me because it was a whole.
He wanted your
gosh.
woman. Obviously.
But I got, I mean, but you got to imagine that. Like, that was my first ever, like, studio event, and they've got a huge backlot that looks like New York City. And there are, like, acrobats flying across.
crazy.
And there's, like,
Yeah.
they're putting up, like, silhouettes in every, like, fake building of people just dancing, and you're just,
What?
and, like, Harrison Ford's over there. Like, you're freaking out.
That's
Yeah, that was.
shaking hands with people that like you didn't think you'd ever be able to.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and geeking
right.
out
Yeah.
like, oh my god, I'm such a good fan. And then they'd either be gracious or you'd weird them out and they'd
Yeah.
walk away from you as fast as they could.
So you made that. Then you made the move to Sony.
Yeah.
What was that move like for you? What was the kind of thought process behind that?
I lucked into the Sony thing. My supervisor, when I was doing my internship at Paramount, she had interviewed for an entry-level job, post internship at both Warner Brothers and Sony. She took the Warner Brothers job, turned down Sony, but said, "But hey, if you want someone, you should talk to this kid."
Yeah.
And thank God she did, because I ended up working at Sony for the next officially and unofficially for nearly a decade.
Wow.
Because they hired me in because of ratings, again, because that's what my internship was, and I hated that part of the job. But when I showed that I could spin things, they started letting me write different things. And it was more like marketing and copywriting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they pay a lot of money when you start, at least in, for all of growing up in Indiana, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'll just do this. Like, and it got to the point where I had to make a choice of whether or not I was going to go the corporate route or not. And as you're about to learn, I'm sure, I chose the other route.
Okay. So, we'll stay at Sony here. You said
Okay.
you're there for unofficially, yada yada, whatever. What were some of the highlights of what you were able to make, able to create, able to write while you were there?
Sure. So my job at Sony was it was marketing for their international television product. So what we did there was Sony, I don't know if they still have this rule, but back then an international company could not own a broadcast channel in the United States.
Okay.
So all of the channels they owned were international. So we had like 4 different brands of like we had an AXN, which was our action channel. We had an anime channel. We had like 4 different channels. And so what I was the voice of those channels globally. So it was, you were writing like the advertising, the promotions, all of that for what was going to be filmed local language in that area. So it was really neat because it's like a crash course in how do you do multiple voices. Yeah. Because every show had, I mean, PR students would love this.
That's very PR.
Yeah. Because it's very much, you have to learn how to communicate in all those different voices. So it was a great training ground for me. Yeah. I became the senior copywriter for their international television group. And this was as I was finishing my MFA. So it was fast. And it was just because, again, I'd been writing my whole life that it was, and I was a fan of film and TV, so I knew. Yeah. I mean, of course, I was going to be able to write about. Yeah, this is why this show is good and why you should buy it. So that was what I was doing there. But I hated the corporate world. I mean, I can't even tell you how much I hated the corporate world. It was because the writing you do is so much like you have to find the creativity in writing it to the lowest common denominator.
And then they'll buy it.
Yeah.
And then you start kind of like trickling back up into like your ultimate vision, so to speak.
I'm there on a film lot watching people film scripts, but I'm writing about selling shows. Fun. And like, so that part just ate away at me too. Yeah. So I actually reached out to the guy that taught that TV drama writing class in college and asked him, I said, look, I'm making, more money than I thought I would. Yeah. But it's not the kind of writing I want to do. I want to learn from you. Can we talk?
So then what's the next step? You reach out to him.
He invites me to lunch.
Okay. Oh, where?
I'm sure it was nice.
Okay. We don't know where. Okay.
I don't remember where it was. I know it was nice.
Okay. We'll just say St. Elmo.
Before the lunch. Yeah, like the equivalent. I know it was in Burbank, but before the lunch was served, he told me about a new show that he was going to be show running called Quantico. And asked if I wanted to be the script coordinator on that show. Okay. I didn't even know what a script coordinator was.
But you were like,
he told
I'm
me
ready for a change.
Yeah, he told me you basically like proofread scripts, and he told me how much the pay would be. And I'm not joking when I tell you it was 1/5 of what I was currently making. Yeah. And I said yes.
hard to make that kind of decision.
It was very hard to make that. Like the whole back of my head, I'm like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Yeah. And that's where I say that there was an unofficial version of me working at Sony, because that is when I created Dunk World Inc. And Dunk World Inc. became my independent marketing group so that I could continue copywriting for Sony and making money doing that while working at a rival studio on their show.
Is this breaking?
Then they changed. They changed the name of the show, and it was called Criminal Minds.
Okay. Wow. So now we're here.
We're addressing the elephant.
We're addressing the elephant in the room.
Yeah. In the room. So that's kind of your build up.
So that's how you get into the room of Criminal Minds. Is you are a script editor,
script coordinator.
Script coordinator. You're proofreading. You are providing some insight. Yeah. So then, what are the next steps of that then? So now we have this total facelift almost, identity change of the show into what it is as we all know it.
Yeah. Right. Script coordinator. You can make of the job what you will. Some people, they just proof the scripts, put them out to their staff that runs them and distributes them. And at the very early days, that's basically what I did. But then I started asking to be able to go to production meetings because I said, well, I'd be better able to make sure that there weren't mistakes from
You had to sell it.
Right.
Corporate man, you had to sell it.
That's what you had to do. And I'd be like, if I went there, you wouldn't have to remember that you need to change these locations because I would take the notes and I would know. So suddenly I was going to production meetings, concept meetings, and I would make the changes that they would forget. And then it got to the point where we had deadlines all the time, and so writers would send stuff at 3 a.m. and it needed to be out by 6 a.m. or something like that. So I would sleep with my phone next to my pillow because I made sure that they knew, hey, I'm always here for you.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where there were some writers who would say, hey, I sent you the script. I can't look at it anymore. Can you just make sure it makes sense by morning? So then I was starting to actually get to write stuff unofficially. But it was the coolest experience because I got to see every version of every script ever written. So I saw why things changed.
And you were the reason why they changed often, it sounds like.
Eventually. Well, what do you mean?
Because you said you would change things like location and just making sure that the storyline is straight.
But I wasn't the reason those locations changed. That would come out of the director comes in, they do the concept meeting, and they're like, I know this says swimming pool, but what if it was a lake?
Okay.
And the writer is either going to be like, well, I really envisioned this as a swimming pool. It can't be anything else. There were some writers like that.
Yeah.
Or they'd be like me, well, yeah, it's a body of water. That's what you need for your story.
Right.
So the making sense part usually was more about dialogue and making sure geography, because when you go through the script, if they're mentioning people that aren't even in that scene, because if you track the story, they're somewhere else in the story. That was the kind of cleanup I was doing originally.
Gotcha.
Once I got to actually get my stab at writing, absolutely. And because I knew eventually I would hopefully get my chance. So I spent those whole first couple of years just studying everything that changed.
What do they like? What do they not like?
Yep.
You just became
So that when I got my chance,
the best.
Yeah.
So I guess you started at this lower level. Did you see potential in Criminal Minds, or was this more of just I want to I just want to write?
True story. Because I talked about Buffy and all the fantasy shows I watched. I'd never seen a crime show in my life.
Yeah.
And when they sent the pilot over to me after I'd already told Sony I was leaving, and after I'd already accepted the job, I watched the pilot and I was like, what have I done?
1/5.
I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be unemployed. And I'm not gonna... Turns out it was a hit show that's still going today. But yeah, and that was me not knowing the crime genre. I mean, now I'm able to actually say for crime shows, it's actually really good. But yeah, I did not, it went so far over I was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Well, I already signed it. I guess
the deal is done.
I guess we're hanging on.
But then I fell in love with it because I got to be part of the making and see it as it evolved. And everything I ever wrote for that show, I wrote as a fan of the show too.
So then, a couple years, you kind of make your way up the ladder. How long were you on? And at what point were you like,
this is it?
Yeah.
So
were you happy with your work where you were? What was the highest in the ladder that you got, I guess?
In the franchise supervising producer.
Okay.
So the way it works, so as you climb, they give you more responsibility. And and nowadays shows don't do this as much, but we were unique in that we weren't like a Netflix show where it's serialized and you need to watch the preceding episode to understand the next. So they were all pretty self-contained. You don't see a lot of character growth in one season. You'll see it over 15 years. They're very different. But so they were standalone in the point that they were like mini movies. So we as the writers and then ultimately producers really got to oversee our little 1 hour episode.
Okay.
So I got to go to all of the cut meetings, with the director's cut, producer's cuts. I got to sit in the editing room for those. I was on set every day that it filmed. They don't do that anymore. Later jobs that I had, I did one show. I never set foot on the set of that show in my entire life.
That's so weird.
It's just so crazy to think about.
It's you can't see what you're a part of, really.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a simulation. It's in theory,
Yeah.
this is doing something.
And you're
I don't know
writing
what.
scripts, and then you're handing them over, and so you're not on set changing things as they need to be changed. So you're just getting the dailies, and the footage is coming back. You're like,
Huh?
well, that's not what I wrote. Like, what happened? Because then they've got their producer or directing producer on set is making changes as they need to.
And you hope that like they have the vision that you put into it.
Yeah.
Right.
Which often probably does or doesn't happen. And
But that's where like I differentiate myself from some of those people that were so rigid. Like that's the joy of being in a collaborative environment. Like the shows that we do here at the university, you know, it's like everyone gets to pitch their ideas.
yeah.
That's the fun of like, and where I was never rigid in what I wrote because I didn't care as long as it was fulfilling the function of the story. Why, if it makes people's lives easier that we need to move it to a lake instead of a swimming pool because we're already going to be outside and it fits with our shooting schedule,
Yeah.
make it a lake.
Like you weren't stubborn and like big headed about things like that where it's like
Right.
I
mean,
didn't see
sure,
the
why
point in
not?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all here to make a show come in under budget
Yeah.
Right.
or at rough budget. I tended to have slightly expensive episodes, but that's because they let me blow stuff up. Like I was
you go.
like the
Boom.
pen ultimate. The showrunner would always
Like,
write the
send Rick.
final
Send
episode.
him now.
Literally, it was always like, what am I going to
It's
do?
time.
I got to blow a bank up. I got to
Okay.
make everyone bleed out of their eyes. I got, I did all sorts of fun stuff. So they would always give me a little extra money just because the finale was always like a two-parter.
Yeah.
And so I got the joy of like having the big bang,
Yeah.
whereas the showrunner had to kind of wrap everything up into a nice little bow.
Yeah.
So she would make jokes about like how I get the cooler end of the episode because I get to make things
Blow
go
up.
boom.
When you're writing, you know, something like that where it's like, let's blow up a bank. Is it let's blow up a bank and then
Right
some
around
other
it?
person's like, actually we can't do that, like that's not possible? Or is it, I know this is possible, so we're gonna do this? Like what's the process of writing, you know, locations, explosions, etc.?
Sure. You would give production a heads up. Like if it's something like that, like you know well before you're going to be filming it, hey, just so you know, last episode, we're blowing up a bank. So we need to figure out how to do that. And then that's why you have like your unit production manager, your directing producer, your line producer, because they're all the ones that then are like, well, you know, we did see that one bank set on the back lot of Universal, which is where we blew up the bank. So you can rig it, and then we just found the interior. So it's not as like crazy as you think it's going to be.
It just looks that way.
It does, yeah. Oh, I still remember. I can visualize it right now when we blew that up. It was awesome.
You're like, yes,
Yeah, seriously.
we did it. Probably ruined the shot, ruined the take.
Oh, and because there's so much that goes into it, right? Like, because
Yeah.
you got like one shot to do it.
Yeah.
And, so it's a little nerve wracking too, but yeah, we had the best FX guys, so it was always you knew it was gonna look awesome.
And so when you left there, when you left the show, obviously it wasn't finished. The show is still happening. When timeline-wise in the show did you depart?
I was on the mothership for 10 years, so
Okay.
till the end of season 10.
Okay.
And then I was over on the international show.
Okay.
Sorry, I have to think about what Beyond Borders.
Okay.
That did not last very long.
Okay.
So I made it. How did season 10 end? Yeah, I made it to the end of season 10 for the mothership.
Okay.
And then Garcia came over and did. So I was there, I say 12 years, but 11 seasons of the franchise.
Okay. So in those 11 years and 11 seasons, could you give me a top 3, top 5 episodes that you were like proud, fond,
I cooked with that.
have memorable moments of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Episode 200.
Okay.
Because I pitched the episode not knowing I was going to be the one writing the episode.
Okay.
How
does that work? Because you obviously have a vision for like the pitch,
Right.
and then you just hand it off to someone and go make it.
No, we're involved in the but for the writer's room, because we always start before production. So you always start like 6 weeks ahead, or at least back in the day, that's how it happened. And we would pitch our story ideas at the very beginning. The first like week, we had to come in with story ideas, pitch them to our two executive producers. And we knew our 200th episode was going to be that season. And the pitch that I gave, totally thought it was just going to be some random episode. And then they were like, nope, this is going to be the 200th episode. And jaws dropped for sure on that one. Because I was one of the younger writers. Yeah. But I'd been on the show for so long that I knew. And my pitch had been, we had lost. There was a point, and it was highly publicized, so I'm okay talking about it, but where two of our female actresses had gotten fired off of the show. We'd gotten one back nearly right away, but then anyway, there was one where when we got her back, we changed what her position was because, we wanted to show that there was an evolution, and to the actress' credit, she didn't want to be the same
role
person because at the time she was very much like, well, this person, they seem to feel like they could cut, so I don't want to be that anymore when we got him back. And the bottom line is that was never her. That was this douchebag that worked at the network. But so I had envisioned, well, okay, so she was gone from the show for like a year. What if we had like a secret backstory? And it ultimately, that was what they went with. And it was so cool because we got to bring the other woman that had left back and kind of paired them back together. And they had kind of been fired around the same time. And both ultimately came back and are still on the show. So it's really cool because we'd kind of write like what was really happening, but just code it so that you couldn't really tell. But yeah, that was my favorite for a lot of reasons. It had a big budget. We did a lot of like shooting. I got to bring back Paget and like there was an incident like where I felt like I grew in as a producer too, because there was an incident where there was someone who, how do I phrase that, could not do scenes on a certain day because of no fault of their own. And so I ended up having to rewrite it. And, since it's the 200th episode, they didn't want me to rewrite it, because they had big moments that we were filming that day. But I honestly, there was no way I could let them go on set that day. But I promised them that I would rewrite the script so that their character did not lose out on the bigger moments that they were going to have. And so I spent the next like 4 nights up rewriting the script as we were filming because I had to write them out that day. And I gave them kind of their own little storyline or whatever. And I will say that because I did that, the actors understood that I had their backs because it was a situation where, like I said, I was going to do something. I did it. And I made better off. And I made sure that everyone got their moment because everyone wants to have their. That's how you're the key to being successful. Screenwriter is you give people their moments. That's how I got the first episode when I pitched that. Before it was even done filming, they had offered me a full-time job. That's how I did the 200th. It's just you want those characters and those actors that have been around forever. You want to make sure that they get their moments.
I'm sure that gives you more, opportunities when everybody's happy. They want to give you more. You
definitely want your cast to be happy.
Everybody's happy when Rick does it, so let's just give him more and more.
We loved it when Rick.
You want them saying that. I would say that was not always what they were saying about me, but it's. But you definitely want the actors to be happy. Otherwise, you want them happy.
Awesome. Right. All right, so now moving past Criminal Minds, we've got the elephant out of the room. We appreciate you talking with us about that. What's up next, Evan?
Well, we're gonna go into today kind of your journey to get it here. You've done a couple teaching gigs. You were at Cornell. You've been at UIndy previously, did something, and then you were at Emerson for a little bit, which I know we talked about Emerson, so it's kind of like first full circle, I guess. That's kind of cool. But, what was that path, and then what got you back here?
The path was very much Ed Bernero, who was the showrunner that taught the class when I was in college. So I took that. I'm going to stop touching the table. Sorry.
You're wiggling my plant here, which I mentioned the plant in the first episode. It brings me joy every day to have to take care of the little plant. So.
It's a great little feature of this.
It's a great little. Yeah, it might be here every episode. It might not. because it lives on my windowsill and it needs the sunlight.
It's relaxing.
And there's not a whole lot of
there
sunlight.
is no
in here.
sunlight.
Yeah. So.
So Ed taught and ran a show. So, that was how I learned. So I very much in my jobs, like even when I was at Sony, I created an internship program. When I was at Criminal Minds, I created an internship program because I wanted, as a matter of fact, the guy that took over for me on Criminal Minds was my first intern. Not my first intern. Wait, is that right? But he was, I would go back to LMU and I would talk to classes. And he was in one of those classes. And then cool. I hired him as an intern. And then when I left to go to the spinoff, he took my job. That's my job. It was really neat. It was, yeah.
That's really cool.
What about him stood out? As someone who, yourself, you would go back and you talk at schools, obviously as a professional in the industry.
Yeah.
Right. For those of us who are in college, who maybe have some of these guest speakers come into classes.
That's a great question.
What about him stood out? And what did he do?
Well, he asked.
Okay.
I mean, no,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth of the matter. Like you have to take those opportunities and, you have to, when I speak, I'm surprised, how do I phrase this? Here was someone that had a job in the industry that you want to work in, coming, they're an alum. What do?
Yeah.
You talk to the alum and you say, hey, any opportunities over there? And I knew, because my internship got me where I wanted to go. That's why I built the internship program there.
Yeah.
And that's an automatic in. Like when you guys go out and you do interviews, if you're from UIndy, it doesn't guarantee the job, but it probably, if the hiring manager is from UIndy and they see that on your resume, it probably guarantees you an interview.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but
yeah.
Because
there's at least a baseline connection, and you have. Hopefully, that person is fond of their time at UIndy.
Yeah. It gives some credibility.
Because you've gone through the you've gone through the program, so I knew what he was learning. I knew, and it was a no-brainer. And we started him out as an intern. He was great. Then he went on to writer's assistant, script coordinator.
He did what you did.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Yeah. So those are the cool opportunities, because then you're creating opportunities. I encourage when you guys go out, create the opportunities for those coming up behind you, because that's how I looked at it.
Yeah.
Because I knew I'd gotten there first, and I didn't get the internship at Paramount first. One of the people in my grad program got it first, and then when she left it, she's like, hey, want me to recommend you? I said, yes, please.
Yeah. Yes.
So, and again, that's that, giving it back. Someone gave me the opportunity, I give it to them.
Yeah.
So the teaching was the same way. I learned that changed the trajectory of my path in life, was taking the class from an industry veteran that was actually working in the industry, teaching the class. So I made it a point of, I would teach while I was working up in my career. So when I was working in the marketing and advertising world, that's when I taught at Emerson, LA, because that was a marketing program.
Yeah.
When I was on Criminal Minds, I taught at Columbia College because that was a film school, and the classes I taught were psychology and film, because I'm on a psychology show, right? So it was a no-brainer. When I taught it, I was an adjunct at UIndy back in 2016.
Yeah.
Because I had come back, my mom was running for office, and I was like, well, hey, I'm in town. Let me just see if they want me to teach there.
Yeah.
and they did. And I taught digital storytelling. So yeah.
Was that a course that was already here?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they just happened to be looking for someone to teach it?
They happened to be looking for someone, and I came in and taught it, and that's how I met Rebecca Gilliland, who's now the associate provost. And the way I framed that class was, we were going to go help a nonprofit. So we were going to recreate all the digital content for a local nonprofit.
Yeah.
And that was right up the alley of, our motto here is education for service for impact, right? And that just hit it. And so, so this school was cemented in me, because the students in that class, honestly, if I had a negative experience, I wouldn't have even considered it. But those students in that class, and a lot of them were Top Dog students.
Yeah.
As the Top Dog firm director that year was in that class, And all the students in there were just so cool that I was like, yeah, this is. I got more joy in teaching people, and like one of my last jobs in LA before I came back was actually mentoring new writers coming up, and I was like, this is definitely what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was time. So all that teaching, I knew eventually one day, again, I was going to end up teaching full time.
Yeah.
So I needed that experience, because otherwise you're not likely to get the job, right? I mean, even with my history out there, it didn't guarantee me a job, but at least I had the credentials showing, like, throughout the years I had taught classes, gotten decent reviews, so that when there was a job opportunity that I could get into it.
And like you said, clearly you wanted to help others along the path. I mean, you creating opportunities, teaching classes, sharing your knowledge of the industry and of your experiences, what you learned, what worked, what didn't work. You know, throughout that time, it was clear that this is kind of where you were going to end up at some school.
I'll be honest, I thought it was going to be Franklin College, but
Yeah.
I'm glad it's UIndy.
Well, and I kind of want to ask, like, you did that little adjunct thing. You seem to enjoy it. You were a Top Dog client.
I was. Yep.
Where did that come
content.
in? Where did that come in? Did that come in before the adjunct thing, after? And
what is inspired content?
Okay.
Please.
Yes.
Please.
Well, rest in peace, inspired content. But
2023.
2020 killed it. But okay. So you can't help, I think, at least if you have my psychology, become disenfranchised with Hollywood at a certain point, because there's a lot of money and there's a lot of greed associated with that money. And the germ came from, I had two bosses that created a project together. And when you create shows, there's something called the back end. You get a percentage point in profitability of the show.
Okay.
And so it's two people, they're given 5 points, and they get to divvy it up.
Okay.
And so in my head, it was like, well, 2.5, 2.5.
Yeah.
They battled over who got the third point.
Yeah.
And it caused some friction between the two of them. And I witnessed it because one would tell me what was going on. And in the back of my head, this is where it started forming, where I was like, what would happen if, rather than battling over that 1 point, that 1 point went to charity? Because then if you think about shows and when you create projects, like, I get random residual checks from my time back at Criminal Minds, right?
Yeah.
And some of those checks are significant dollar values. And, you know, if someone had a 1 point was dedicated to a charity or organization for a good cause, they would get that money just as
passive income.
So if you could create intellectual property that highlighted causes in need, and then give those organizations or organizations like them a back-end profit percentage, so that any creative work you did, if it was ever successful, they would get money from it. That was the concept of inspired content. So
That's great.
So it got the greed out of Hollywood. It was if Netflix was a nonprofit helping out other organizations. So like, the ultimate goal for inspired content was you were going to have subscription fees that were actually tax deductible, because they were donations to your nonprofit, and then that money produced the shows, and as they were more successful, you produced more shows and more shows, and so it became a nonprofit model for that. So the launch party was organized by Top Dog.
Okay.
Because Rebecca Gilland, and
so it was after the adjunct thing.
Yeah, because I told her, you know, there were a couple times where we had met up in LA. She had come out and asked what I was doing, and I would tell her, and I told her, and she's like, well, you might want to be a Top Dog client. And I was, from out in LA when they were doing it here, and they created just the first year. I was a Top Dog client 2 years in a row. The first year they created all the assets, my logo, all of that. The second year was going to be the launch, and they planned a launch party. We had a contract downtown. It was going to launch fall of 2020.
Awesome.
So Little pandemic occurred.
Yeah. Just a little.
We were not able to have launch parties during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We were unemployed. I was self-financing the nonprofit entirely by myself. Had gotten office spaces in downtown Indianapolis. That was fun.
Wow.
And I'm too, like, when I got out of the, like, they offered, so I had to back out of all that, but, like, you know, you've paid the deposits and you know everyone's hurting. So I was like, no, keep the deposit. Like, it was one of those. So I retracted backwards, always planned on redoing it. But then when I knew, so when I left LA, my plan was to come here and to do that.
Yeah.
But when I crossed the border, not even kidding, when I crossed the border from California into Nevada, I got an email update telling me that they were hiring for a professor of practice in television at UIndy. And I was like,
step on it.
I emailed. I was like, what is this job? What is this about? What is this?
Yeah.
And because, again, the plan was still inspired content, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity because it was everything that I wanted. And the selling point for me ultimately, and then this was a new chair because I finally killed inspired content last year. And that's when the current chair told me, Rick, everything you want to do with inspired content, you can do here.
Yeah.
And she was right.
Yeah.
And so from that day forward, I was like, oh, I don't need this. We're just going to do it here. And so that's...
I don't need this third party to, like, to be in the way of everything when you can accomplish everything you want with that.
Right. WICR is the voice of the arts. UIndy TV creates assets for nonprofits, creates assets for organizations that need it. And then the ultimate goal would be that we become a production company that does that. And we create the inspired content model here.
I guess this kind of like segues, like you came to UIndy. Obviously, this was a great opportunity for you. Did you have an idea of exactly what you wanted to do with the program? Like, did you have an idea of what was already going on? And like, okay, like I gotta do all this.
And I guess, like, how did it look different before and after the Rick Dunkle effect?
When I toured the facility, Scott Eaker gave me the tour.
When was this? So okay, timeline. Let's put a date on this.
Timeline. Okay. 2022. Okay. So the job listing was in the beginning of 2022.
Okay.
So I came back. All my stuff was still in LA. I came back because I had tried a couple times to get back. And this time I was like, all right, I'm going to come back and see who's hiring and figure it out. And obviously that thing had happened. But I also interviewed at a couple other universities, got another job offer over in Ohio. And I was like, well, I'm not moving back to go to Ohio. Like, I want to be here. The previous year I'd gotten an offer in Boston and I turned it down because of the fact that I wanted to be aiming towards Indianapolis. And that just, as much as I love Boston, I've loved it ever since the Emerson thing. I wanted to be in Indianapolis. So timeline was when I did interviews, I actually brought up UIndy Studios in my interview as like what the model would be. But at the time, radio and TV were not as interwoven as they are now. So I remember Scott Eaker gave me the tour. He's the radio head. And like, in the TV studio, I was like, I don't know how any of this works. Like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Cameras from when I was growing up. I mean, like, it was, and the studio was so condensed with all, like, it looked like there was a lot going on. And so for me, it was, meanwhile, the other job was like teaching screenwriting at the Tom Hanks School. And, and I was like, oh no! Like,
he's made another one of these decisions.
And I knew it was the life decision, but backstory on that too. Like, not to take it to a sadder place, but like, I knew my dad was on his. How do I phrase that? I knew my dad was not going to survive the cancer state that he was in. So I knew I wanted to be home for that as well. So again, that came down to, am I really going to be going back and forth between Ohio all the time. I'm going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
I loved everyone that I talked to here. I knew Rebecca was here. I knew she had been fantastic over the years as we'd grown that relationship.
Yeah.
And then I just believed in what UIndy, like the idea of education for service is
Yeah.
that's the best.
It's inspired content.
It is.
Yeah.
So it was a no-brainer, but UIndy didn't know if they wanted to hire me. So I was like, but I got the offer at the other one, and I'm like, oh no, what do I do?
Yeah.
And ultimately, thank God they did give me the offer, because otherwise, I'd
Criminal
be
Minds legend? How is
I'd
that not
be
giving you a
interviewing
job?
you from Ohio right now.
He'd be calling into the show.
Yeah, right.
We'd have a laptop here zoomed in.
Yeah.
So glad that all worked out.
Well, we are too.
Yes.
We are too. And so
And now we've integrated, and now we're bringing the programs together, and
So cool.
Yes.
we're adopting the studio model because, we talk about this was very much a broadcasting program, because that's my predecessors, both on the TV side and radio side. That was their background.
Yeah.
Well, my background is producing. So for me, and especially like from the Sony era, I definitely learned it's about creating the content and then figuring out where the right platform is for it.
Yeah.
So that's, then I remember one of the first meetings Scott invited me to, I asked, everyone was talking about, we got to send this sports group here, this sports group here. And I raised my hand. I go, well, does radio ever ask like TV what they're doing? And I remember the person that was running, the student that was running radio at the time was like, why would we do that? And I was like, because it sounds like
they're doing the same thing, kind of.
All three of you have sports teams, and why wouldn't you conserve resources?
Yeah.
And that was really, and then my first year, Scott was my mentor. And luckily, because we had such a good relationship, we already saw a little bit of the integration start to happen, because Scott and I team taught a class, and he was just fantastic. But then when he announced that he was leaving, I remember when he said that in the room, and I was like, wait, what's happening now? Like,
what?
And when I found out that I would be doing both, I was a little anxious about that, but it was also brought to me as, remember that pitch you had when we interviewed you the first time? Like,
Let's do
It's
it.
your time.
this might be the opportunity to see where we can have that integration.
Yeah.
I was hired as the interim, but let's see what you can do and whether or not this is viable, or if we're going to need to bring someone else in.
And this was in summer to fall of 23.
Yeah.
So what's really funny about that?
What?
Back in April of 23, Scott gave me the tour of here when I was looking to transfer schools between my sophomore and junior year. Scott gave me the tour, and then I showed up day one, and I'm like, where's Scott go?
that guy?
I had no clue. And this was maybe before he had intentions of, I don't know, if his departure was all right, I'm gone. It was a kind of a preparing to retire at 65 or whatever. You know what I mean?
I don't know what his timeline was, but the school that year offered early retirement to people.
Yeah.
And the offer was so good that he had been here so long, and it was based on how long you're here, that I was surprised it was happening, but I wasn't surprised that he took the opportunity.
Of course.
Right.
And I don't blame him for retiring, because
Because he was
That's
such
the
a
goal.
workhorse, and if anyone deserved it, oh my God.
It.
yeah. But it was just it was so funny. It was I showed up first day, and I'm like, where'd that guy go?
I must have been from downstairs.
Yeah, I
One
was
of the
like, oh, it
tour
must have been
guys,
just
you know.
cool, because I knew he was the head of the communication department, and he reached out to me to give me the tour.
Head of radio.
The chair would argue with that. He was the head of radio, yeah, for sure.
But
But yeah, he'd been here for 20
and he, I guess he was
something years.
the
So,
most seniority,
yeah.
so to speak,
Yeah.
quote unquote, and so it was just
And
he's gone,
he and
here's
Rebecca
Rick.
ended up because then Dr. Gilliland got promoted to associate provost.
Yeah.
So it was both of those things happening at once.
Yeah.
So I think I started as Radiohead maybe a week before Stephanie became chair of the department.
It's crazy.
So then it was suddenly you've got two new people in those positions, and
Was that change? I feel like looking back on it, Rick kind of seemed like a stressed guy. That was kind of Like,
Kind
I
of.
just remember seeing Rick around the hall and being like, I think he's stressed.
I think.
But was that like exciting experience? Like, was it like, oh, like everything's kind of new right now? Like, I can kind of do almost anything, or was it more like
the world is in
what's
the palm
going
of
on?
your
I just gotta take
hand.
things day by day. Like,
I think I find excitement in a lot of things, but I think the stress was real because Scott built this. I mean, like, yes, I know there were other people, but like this was Scott's program
yeah,
for 2+ decades that I was like, why are the keys being handed to me? I'm going to fail. This whole thing's going to come crumbling down. Oh no. So I think it was the stress comes from the responsibility of knowing that there are alumni out there that are part of this program.
Right.
They watch that what happens and you don't want to fail. And I didn't want to fail Scott. Like that was to this day, I still do not want to fail Scott because he's the reason why WICR is the voice of the arts community in Indianapolis. And so that's where you see the stress is I knew they were going to give me a bunch of crap to do and that I was always going to be busy stressed. Yeah. But that stress I can deal with. It was the stress of, okay, now I'm the shepherd and what what the heck? Sorry. You can edit that, right?
No, that's a lot to go through in sounds like less than 2 years of like accepting a new position, moving your entire life back home. Meanwhile, things at home are happening, and I mean it's a lot to go through. Do you think now, we're looking at early spring of 25, we're probably 3 years in now since you've made the change to come back. Do we think we're at a good spot?
I think there's room for improvement.
Of course. But are we at a point where we're comfortable day to day, and now we can look to put the Rick Dunkle effect on it, as opposed to just try and do what Scott did. Meet Scott's standards. No, I want to set my own standards.
Yes, and I think part of that was, that whole first year, as opposed to TV, where when I came in, I was like, well, this just didn't make sense to me. I need to make these changes. Yeah. With radio, I was like having to learn as I go. And so very much was like, I'm not making any changes till I understand everything that's happening around here. Yeah. And what's hilarious about Scott's system is that there have been times where I've made changes and then they immediately fail. or it takes me a minute and they fail. And then I suddenly realize, oh, that's why Scott did this. Yeah. Because at the beginning, he was trying to give me all the information. But like, if something doesn't make sense to me, you can give me all the information you want, but I'm gonna have to try it my way and then see it. And it has been a hilarious journey of there are certain things that I do that I feel like are more efficient, but it is hilarious the number of times where I do something, it does not work, and I have to go immediately back to how Scott had done it, but now I understand why he did it. Exactly. So it's hilarious. I get a chuckle out of it all the time.
All right, so we are now here. It is February of 2025. What does the future hold for the University of Indianapolis Communications Department? Obviously went over. We had our, big facelift. Stephanie kind of spearheaded that. What does that look like in the next 5 years?
Well, I will say I actually just had a similar conversation kind of along these lines the other day with Dr. Weidman. And for me, it's where is media going? And that's what we need to start figuring out how we're going to learn it. Like for me, it's about immersive environments. I'm right now trying to find grant funding so that we can end up getting an immersive environment camera. Those are not cheap. That is, when I say they're not cheap, like it's insanely expensive, but you got to figure, like Apple goggles just came out, like 2-3 years ago. Soon, Apple tends to be the one where, while it came out completely outpriced, that's where things are going. Like eventually it will be affordable for everyone. And so programming is going to have to go to AI, and it's going to have to go to those all immersive environments. DaVinci now has the ability to do spatial audio, which is great. That's our editing program. You can create 3D environments video-wise as well. We're not a tech program. We're a production we produce content for platforms, but eventually our platform's going to be VR.
Yeah.
So that's where the future is. Like, I want us to get to the point where we're creating entertainment content, because I think we're very good at doing news and sports, but we've got other avenues to do there. And that's that comes from a content standpoint, and I think that's going to be more easily serviced by working with theater, because we've already got actors coming up from that group, right? And so we can get into, there's some universities where they actually produce a weekly soap opera, and students will not schedule their classes during that time because they want to watch it live.
Yeah.
I've been pitching Greyhound's Anatomy since I got here. Not since I got here, but as soon as I found out that the nursing department had that third floor fake medical wing, I was like, oh, we have to film here. What do you know? I look at everything as a location. So I would say that ultimately we want to get to the point where we're creating more creative, original content. But then we're going to have to start thinking about platforms. As we've started delving into podcasts, we're also going to have to start thinking about what is that next realm for media, so that you guys learn it, or at least the students coming up behind you learn it before they're out in the workforce and they need to have it.
Yeah, I mean, eventually when I graduate here, we're going to have to hand this co-host position off to somebody, ideally, and that's, somebody that you're going to have to pick, or we're going to have to pick.
Oh, no.
And so, it's like you've been doing your whole life, is setting the path for the next person and for what the future could and will hold. So, I think it's in great hands with you and with everybody here, in the comm department. And I think 100%. That, in the 2 years that I've been here, where you've been in charge and we've had these kind of new figureheads emerging and kind of taking their positions, I think now things are kind of, the dirt and the dust has settled a little bit from the last maybe couple of years of crazy and change and all that. And I think now we're at a point where we've got a good foundation. We're going to start moving forward and seeing, what could really unfold.
Yeah, now it's about pushing ourselves.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
So I've got no further questions.
No, I'm excited. I feel like our program is just in kind of a rebuilding a new era, really. We just absorbed theater and TV, radio, doing new things. Top Dog doing new things. Reflector new things.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of doing new things right now, so it's an exciting time to be a commie.
It's an exciting time to be a Greyhound.
A Greyhound.
The world changes on a daily basis, and we are
part of it.
Yeah,
we're part of the world,
and we're part of it. The whole motto change. The whole reason they added that, for impact. We're not just education for service. It's for impact. We want to have tangible results.
Yeah.
And that's what we have the ability to do with all the new stuff that we're bringing in. And you created a show last year. You were part of the team that created the show.
Right.
And
we're creating a show right now.
You're creating a show right now. It's that old saying, if you build it, they will come. If we give you the opportunities, what can you create with that? You know? And I just think that we're going to see a lot of cool stuff coming out of the program.
So excited.
Yes, I'm really excited to see, what happens here after my time is done. I will be sure to stay subscribed.
And visit.
That's the worst part of teaching, let me tell you. I still have not accepted the fact that next year, everyone that was a freshman when I came in, they will graduate and they will leave and abandon me.
Of course.
And that I'm supposed to be happy about that because that's the end goal, is that we get you out of here, you graduate, you go work in the workplace. But it gets harder every year. Because
we're not coworkers, Rick.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not your writers.
But that's how we craft the classes in the experiential, right? As coworkers. So I have much closer relationships with you guys than if I'm lecturing for a public speaking class or something like that, right? So it is one of those things where I have to remember, their job is to leave. So
they're trying to leave.
Exactly.
Well, I've got one question that I like to ask everybody.
The question.
It's the question. It's the closer. I think every day, you've said that you've got a very full plate. You've got a lot of things going on. You've got a lot of
That's an
tasks to
understatement.
accomplish. It's very much an understatement, but it's important to remember yourself. It's important to remember that you are the most important person in your life.
Oh, you
right?
sound like my therapist right
And
now. Okay.
it's a little bit of therapy, but my question to you is, and we'll both answer this as well, what every single day can you rely on that without fail will make you smile, will make you happy, will make you, enjoy the day when maybe it's a crappy day, maybe nothing's going right, maybe you're stuck in traffic, maybe whatever. They got your coffee order wrong at Starbucks. Maybe all these things are awful, but there was one thing every single day that you're like, I know it's gonna hit like it hits every single day. I can answer first. Evan can answer. We'll let you brainstorm. My thing last episode was my plant, which is why I bring it in now. I got this probably a month ago now. It was these little kind of starter growing kits. They were at Walmart. They were in the clearance section. I said last episode I was a clearance section fiend. I never leave a store without, taking a browse at the tags. And it was $5. And I was like, yeah, we'll do it, right? And it gives me an excuse every day to have to open up my shutters and something else to take care of every single day because I'm a dark person. I enjoy the dark. I like my little cave, right? But it forces me to have to bring the light in and, just doing simple things like that. And it's like, it just kind of brightens your day. And then eventually I saw it sprouting actual greens and I'm like, oh, they didn't just sell me some fraud plant. It's actually a plant. And it's been awesome to see it grow over the past couple weeks now. And so that was my first thing. The second thing is I always see myself when I'm going back looking through pictures, and I pretty much shoot every day. I'm shooting something every single day, and usually my subjects are people. And I'll find myself when I'm going back looking at my pictures and someone's smiling, someone's laughing, whatever, whether it's during a show or whether it's a celebration from a score, from sports or whatever, right? I find myself smiling at their happiness in the moment. And so, almost every single time, without fail, I'm like, oh yeah, we're all having a good time here. So that's my thing for the second episode here. And this will be a recurring question every single episode, so you're going to have to find something new every single episode. And it may hit you, it may spark you, but that's my thing.
My new one is kind of similar to yours, actually. As of lately, I've been trying to learn a new skill, photography. Bought a new camera, Canon R8. I love it. Mirrorless full frame.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great camera.
It's a great camera.
But photography is something that I'm trying to learn, getting into. So I've been loving that, taking pictures of sports. But I also went to like an ICE protest. Took pictures of like political stuff. I've been doing some a lot political and a lot of sports stuff. It's very interesting. So I think, just messing around with Lightroom or taking a picture, using my camera has definitely been something I look forward to every single day. Go follow my media account. I've been posting like every day. So.
You have been, and you've been getting a lot better.
Yeah.
I'll say, as someone who's like, I'm not great, but I think in the last year or so, I've radically improved from when I first started shooting.
Yeah.
I can definitely see you getting better, like every single week.
Appreciate it.
So, what you got for us?
All right. First one, I feel like I'm slightly stealing from your plant, but it's my dog.
Your dog.
Because no one's ever more happy to see me,
of course,
than my dog. I too like to live in a cave.
Yeah.
So you have to walk your dog.
Yeah.
So she forces me to get out of the house and go around the neighborhood and breathe this air that's called fresh.
That's called.
So I definitely think she's got to be one of them because
what kind of dog do you have?
She's a German Shepherd.
Okay.
She was my dad's dog.
Okay.
So I was giving him hell for the fact that I suddenly inherited this dog, and honestly, she's the best thing. She's fantastic. I love her to death. She is awesome. And again, because she makes me be more active. I can't just. If I could, I would sit on my desk and I would just work all the time, but I can't, right? Because she forces me out. And then this is gonna sound corny or
nothing's corny.
something.
I said a plant. Nothing's corny after.
Dylan
Nothing's
said a
corny after the plant.
Watching.
I'm gonna tear up here.
You are. I hope.
I'm gonna cry.
It's watching you guys, and that's a euphemism or more of an overgeneralization. Like when Grayson got her gig, and when Hannah got her anchoring gig. Seeing you guys when you get out of here, and when I see it happen in here, like I've seen the difference between Liam from. When he he was somewhere, I was like, "Oh, what's gonna happen with this kid?" And now he's running things. Like that's the coolest thing to witness. And like, I like that more than, like it's watching you guys because not only, I don't know, it's just the coolest thing because it makes you feel like you're actually having an impact on people.
Yeah, and you're seeing the results and the fruits of your labor happen in front of you. We're like. You're nurturing this plant and you're watching it grow.
Wow.
And you're eventually going to see the flowers.
Dylan.
We walked right into that one.
You're going to see the flowers from this poppy.
Everything's about the plant.
Everything's about the plant.
You all are the plants that I'm watering, and
life is a plant.
You're going to leave and head out into the sunlight and hopefully spread some seeds.
Hopefully live longer.
Hopefully live,
hopefully
yes,
continue to live. We'll see how this plant does.
One day we'll sprout.
One day.
A flower.
Yes.
And then come back and visit your professor after you're gone.
Yes, of course.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, Rick, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was our interview with Rick Dunkle. Very interesting guy. I learned a lot more about him for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't know really anything about his, like, how he got here. And so it's just very interesting to hear his story and that process, and I feel like that's kind of similar to what a lot of us are trying to do, get that like internship, get some education that's going to help us lead down the right way. And it's really cool to see like someone as successful as we know Rick is, who did that as well. And
it's really interesting to hear about the steps because it's so easy to go, okay, he was a writer on Criminal Minds, that's like the big like we said, elephant in the room that sticks out, and it's like, whoa, how'd you go from that to coming back to Indianapolis and teaching at, I don't want to say we're a small school, but we're no Syracuse. We're not in LA. We're no USC. I mean, someone with the track record and the background he has, I'm sure could have opportunities elsewhere. 100%. But he's definitely Ohio. But he's definitely found his footing here, and hopefully those that are watching, may be interested in coming here and may be considering our school. And when they look up Rick Dunkle, they're going to see this episode and go, I can learn a lot about this guy in the hour and a half podcast that we've shot today. I think I learned a lot about, him and what he's really about. Yeah. And I mean, Rick's he's a great person to talk to. If you want to be in this industry, I mean, like we heard today, he's been through it. Like he hasn't had the easy road. No. Like we imagine it to be sometimes. I mean, it's not as glorified. He practically started it from the bottom. Yeah. And made it to the top all through his hard work and the education and I think that it's nice that we have somebody like that, so that we don't look up to this guy who just had it his whole life. I mean, Rick's someone that he's not a Nepo baby. There's no nepotism there. There's no, I mean, he earned and worked for everything that he's got. If you take foundations of TV and radio and TV, I mean, he's one of the best people we could ask for to help walk us through for sure this process. Yeah, and I mean, he's 1,000%, has your interest and your best interest in mind when we're doing anything. 100%.